Should you be utilizing your company's 401k? For most investors, the answer is yes. But as always, it depends on your circumstances. And one of those things is what investments are available. Most companies offer at least a fairly inexpensive S&P 500 derivative. So if that's the case, if that's what's available to you, they are generally called something 500, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Fidelity. Something 500 is usually in the name. The expense ratio should be super low. And if that's the case, those are generally a relatively conservative investment that most people can take. But just because that's available doesn't mean you should do it. Now, something else to consider, is your company matching? Is it going to match a certain amount of your investment into the 401k? Now, that plays a big role. And, if they do, the answer will be, of course. If you don't have other extenuating circumstances and you're just investing in this 401k, then it makes sense to go up to at least the match, right? If they're matching the first $1,000 dollar for dollar, okay. It's going to be hard to beat that match in the long run. Now, what circumstances might cause you not to do it? Well, if there's a vesting period, if there's a 5-year vesting period and you plan on retiring next year and they're not going to give you the match, well then, okay, put that into your calculation. Another thing is your debts. What kind of debts are you holding? Are you holding high interest debts? And for now, what I want to do is take a quick look at some things in regards to debts and why you may not want to, depending on the level of your debts. So I'm going to take a look here at this Google Sheet. And what we have here is essentially, we have a situation where, if we have $1,000, let's say we have $1,000. Well, this $1,000 may, let's say your company only matches $1,000 or, obviously some multiple of 1,000. Well, if you have 21% credit cards and it's over 1,000, there might come a debate in your mind whether it's a better idea to pay off the 21% credit card versus getting the match of 100%. Now, of course, what you're paying with your credit, let's say you just had a $1,000 bonus, just for instance, and you could put it all into your 401k, or you could take the after-tax amount, say you have $800 left after taxes, and use that amount to pay off debt. Well, in the short run, it's definitely a better idea to invest in the 401k in the short run, if you can get that money and if you're able to pay down the debt. And, I have some calculations here that I went through, but if you keep that debt in the long run, if you don't actually pay down that debt that you would have with the $800, well, if your debt is 21% and the stock market's only gaining 10% a year, then, after 7 years or so, 8 years, it's catching up. And by 9 years, it may have passed the total value of that $800 that you didn't pay off in credit card debt is now going to be higher than the total value that you got from the $1,000 that you invested in your 401k, even though there was a 100% match, even though you got 10% a year. That difference between 21% and 10% catches up at around year 9. And then, of course, it flies by it after that. So these are things you have to consider in your life and your life choices. So yes, it is generally a great deal for most people if they don't have crazy debts. Like 21% is a pretty high rate. If you don't have, these high debts to take care of them. You also have to remember too that 21% is guaranteed, right? You have to pay it. You have to pay it unless you're going into bankruptcy or something like this, or planning on it, or thinking that that's an option. Well, then the 401k becomes a better option if they can't get into your 401k. So think about that. That's a huge number, 21%. Like if you look at 20%. And these kind of returns are hard to get, nigh impossible, consistently in the stock market or any other legitimate investment. It's hard to get. Now, as a trader, sure, you might be able to do that if you're a remarkable trader. A trader like one of a kind. Investing, extremely difficult, 20%. But it's very easy to have a 20% debt, right? You can get that in your credit cards, these payday loans with the fees and everything associated with them, 20%, it's about right. But if you carry these things for a long time, I'll just have a quick example up here. If you have a $1,000 loan at 20%, after 10 years, if you're not paying it down, it's $6,192. In 20 years, it's $38,000. That $1,000 is now $6,200. After 10 years, after 20 years, it's $38,000. That's how quickly things grow at 20%. Now, yes, if you look at the stock market and they're 10% that it generally gets over a 12-year cycle, 14-year cycle, 15-year cycle, at 10%, your $1,000 after 10 years is going to be worth about $2,600. Compare that to the $6,200 for the 20% return, right? And also for 20 years, it's going to be worth about $6,700. Yeah, I'm not thinking about inflation, any of these things, just raw numbers. And remember this as well, the 401k, the value of it might be greater, but you have to remember, you will have to pay taxes on that eventually. Like when you're paying down debt, the taxes you paid before you paid down the debt. But when you're getting this 401k, at some point you're going to have to pay taxes on it. That's just the way it works. So now, if you should need that money sooner rather than later, before and you incur some kind of penalty, well, the taxes obviously increase a great deal. So these are some of the thoughts that you should have when you're making this consideration, because I know a lot of people do not understand, these simple things, and this helps to put things in perspective. One, if you have credit card debt, try to get rid of that credit card debt as quickly as you can. If you're paying a high rate of interest, and even if you're not, you probably should pay it off as quickly as you can. Now, what's a high rate of return or interest rate that you're paying whatever credit card company? Well, that's not, an easy thing to explain at any particular time, but what you have to consider is the current risk-free rate in the market, which right now is sitting around 5%. 5% is what you could get, 4 or 5% in short-term notes if you were to loan banks money through CDs or the U.S. government through treasury bills. You could probably get 4 or 5% in the very extreme short run. That will change over time. But what you really need to think about is, these credit card debts are guaranteed debts. So even if you're paying 7%, 8%, it's generally a good idea to pay them off as quickly as possible, to reduce that number to zero. So you're not paying any interest. Pay it off monthly. Now, this isn't possible for everybody. Everybody's, a lot of people have made a lot of mistakes, made some bad decisions, and look, bad things happen. It's not, entirely a bad choice to go into debt. But you have to understand, the position that you've placed yourself in and how that may be postponing your ability to prepare for the future. Or at least makes you make different decisions when you prepare for your future. So take that into consideration. Investing in the stock market when you have these kinds of debts is not a good idea. Now, yes, the 401k may be a different kind of animal, at least in the short run, if you're able to divvy out a plan that makes it the right one in the long run. Which means, yes, okay, I'm going to invest in my 401k, but I plan to pay off all these debts in a fashion that's quick enough so it makes sense for me to do so. So think about that. Think about these decisions. If you need help, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll do the math for you, or I'll do some of the math for you, because these are complicated decisions. They're not necessarily the simplest things in the world, because you have your taxes to consider, and that matters. Those things matter. And your rate of taxation, your age till retirement, your age till you're going to quit your company. Well, these things all matter. Things you should consider, and maybe most important when making decisions, just remember that the guaranteed paying off your debts is guaranteed, right? It's going to reduce these future obligations. And if they're higher than the risk-free rate available in the market, which currently, like I said, is around 4 or 5%, then almost always a good idea to pay them off. If you are in some kind of debt trouble where you have payment plans and things like that, and credit is not easily available for you, another thing to consider, right? Because, emergencies happen as well. So maybe you need to put that money into an emergency. But if you're just paying down your credit card, if an emergency occurs, a real emergency, hopefully, would be the only time that you would use it. But if you need to do that, well, then it's there, it's available. And, having that money sitting aside, I don't know. It's never made too much sense to me, but, I've never really put myself in that situation. So you have to work it through yourself, or, seek out a financial advisor if you need one. There's a lot of people out there who give financial advice directly. They can look at your situation. Now, if you don't have the money to do that, well, you will have to try to work it out for yourself. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'm more than happy to help. Put some thoughts into your mind. I don't give specific advice to anyone because it's ultimately your decision, what you think is going to happen in your future. But general advice, absolutely. General advice for anybody. Thank you for watching. I've got to run now.